So I came across this article in the Times of Israel that I thought was really interesting and I wanted to share it. Now, the information revealed in this article, I was unable to find other corroborating sources for it. So I'll take the specifics of this story with a grain of salt. But that being said, regardless of whether this story is 100% true or not, it speaks to something larger that I want to address because I think it's really important, but still, maybe there is some truth to this story. And basically what it is saying is that Emmanuel Macron, who a few days ago came out and said that France would be recognizing Palestine as a state at the upcoming United Nations General Assembly in September, apparently behind the scenes, this move was supposed to be a joint agreement alongside Canada and the United Kingdom, but Macron was unable to convince the Starmer government or the Carney Liberal government here in Canada to do the same. Saying here, working with Saudi Arabia, Macron came up with a plan to have France plus G7 allies Britain and Canada recognize Palestinian statehood while pushing Arab states to adopt a softer stance towards Israel through a United Nations conference. But despite weeks of talks, he failed to get others on board. Now, this is the detail that I can't find other sources for, so we're going to take it with a grain of salt. But if this is true, this is pretty pathetic, in my opinion. For many reasons, we'll dive into them. But if this is true, it means that France coming out and recognizing Palestinian statehood was supposed to be a joint agreement, or at least maybe not supposed to be, but Macron wanted it to be. He wanted it to also have the backing of Canada and the UK, two countries who claim to be progressive liberal democracies who are, pro-human rights and all of that stuff, and yet they can't even recognize the sovereignty of a people who are currently facing a famine, a genocide, an occupation. And now, this comes in the larger context, which I wanted to cover anyway, so whether or not that specific story is true, I just want to talk about how cowardly, weak, and just plain stupid, frankly, the policy of Canada and the UK has been towards the Israel-Palestine conflict. So you have growing pressure here in Canada where I live, even from the Prime Minister's own party. There's growing calls for Canada to join France in recognizing the Palestinian state. MPs Salma Zahid and Faraz al-Saud, sorry if I mispronounced those names, have come out and said that the Palestinian people deserve recognition, that they should recognize a Palestinian state. Still not enough people in the Liberal Party are coming out and applying this pressure. We need more MPs to do it, and we need people to pressure their MPs to pressure the Prime Minister. Even the fact that we're seeing some growing calls within the party is different than maybe the policy was a year or two ago or even a few months ago. And the NDP, the further left party in Canada, who have many issues of their own, mostly in terms of internal politics and not really having a strong direction for the future. I'd say policy-wise, just my own personal opinions, I tend to agree with the NDP more than the Liberal. But in terms of being able to build a winning coalition, having a good party structure, understanding the game of politics, the NDP are in a very weak place right now. So for more progressive left-wing voters in Canada, many of them went to the Liberals last election, not because they agree with them more, but because that was really the only viable option of making sure that Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives did not get into office. And still to this day, even though the election's over, the NDP find themselves in a very weak and ineffective place. Because it's a minority government, they do have some sway over policy, but it's very small, and even looking forward, the future's not looking too bright for the NDP if they don't kind of get their shit together. I'm someone who personally hope they do, but just calling balls and strikes, they're in a very bad place right now, just in terms of their internal party politics. But the NDP, since the start of this conflict, and even before, I shouldn't even say since the start of this conflict, since the start of the siege on Gaza post-October 7th, and even before that, because obviously, for those in the know, the Israel-Palestine situation has been a huge humanitarian concern for, basically since 1948, even before that, frankly, with the rise of the Zionist movement in the late 19th century and early 20th century. It's just a total colonial project as much as, my own country and most countries on earth are the result of colonial projects, does not mean colonial projects are morally right and that, oh well, we should defend them because that's just how things are. No, just because colonial projects happened in the past doesn't mean we have to support them in the present. And so historically, even though the NDP haven't been perfect on this issue, they've been the best of the three main parties in Canada. And they recently called on Canada again to recognize the state of Palestine. So they're just coming out saying New Democrats commend Emmanuel Macron for the correct political and moral choice. I agree with them there, to recognize the state of Palestine, and they're urging the Prime Minister to do the same. Now, Mark Carney, look, he was elected not based on this issue. This Israel-Palestine was not really something that Canadian voters voted on last time. He was voted to deal with Trump, deal with trade, kind of break down internal trade barriers within Canada, and just kind of, provide a more centrist approach to governance than Justin Trudeau. I myself disagree with Carney on a lot, but I can respect why he was the choice for Canadian voters in this moment. And in contrast to Poilievre, personally, I'm glad we have him. But on Gaza, just like Trudeau before him, he's terrible. He's absolutely terrible. And it's such a grave moral issue, frankly, that it kind of destroys pretty much any of the good he might be doing, just with how horrible he is on this issue. And I want to preface this also by saying I understand that in Canada, we feel this pressure to kind of cave to the US and what they want, because as our direct southern neighbor who is much more economically and militarily powerful than we are, we kind of feel like, we don't want to say the wrong thing and then start being pushed around. But I feel like in this current era, especially with what's happening with Trump, we have to stop being afraid of that, especially on issues like this. Who cares if the US would be mad at us for saying we want to recognize Palestine as a state? Yeah, they would. They would blow up at us. They'd probably threaten more tariffs. They'd probably call us terrorist sympathizers, whatever. But, would you rather deal with that blowback now, but then have history look back on you more kindly? It'll still look back on us unfavorably, because up till now we've been very apologetic for the Zionist Israeli Netanyahu government and their current siege on Gaza. But, at least maybe we can salvage a bit of that historical reputation, or at least not look quite as bad, quite as evil, if, our new prime minister, he had a chance to come in here and change the government's policy. He has just kept it the same. He released this kind of Weasley statement the other day. Canada condemns the Israeli government's failure to prevent the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian disaster in Gaza. Israel's control of aid distribution must be replaced by comprehensive provision of humanitarian assistance led by international organizations. Many of these are holding significant Canadian-funded aid, which has been blocked from delivery to starving civilians. This denial of humanitarian aid is a violation of international law. Canada calls on all sides to negotiate an immediate ceasefire in good faith. We reiterate our calls for Hamas to immediately release all the hostages and for the Israeli government to respect the territorial integrity of the West Bank and Gaza. Canada supports a two-state solution which guarantees peace and security for the Israelis and Palestinians. Canada will work intensively in all fora to further that end, including through the participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the UN high-level conference on a two-state solution in New York next week. Now, what's wrong with this statement is that, once again, as Canada and its government has continued to do, it frames this issue as a conflict, a two-sided war where both sides need to chill out, and, we want the best for both sides, but we're going to, say that Hamas has to release the hostages and Israel has to respect the territorial integrity of Gaza and the West Bank and let aid in. Like, they're making it seem like it's just like, oh, both these guys need to chill out. And it's total bullshit, because obviously Israel has all the power in this situation. They're the ones waging a genocide and ethnic cleansing and currently starving the Gazans. And we can never just come out forcefully and say Israel needs to stop this. We're going to withhold any of our trade or support for Israel, either diplomatically, economically, or otherwise. We failed to be a clear moral actor in this situation. We keep both sidesing it. You can't both sides a genocide. That has been happening from the media and numerous Western governments, most Western governments with a few exceptions throughout this entire 2-year process. And frankly, it's terrible. It's a horrible look. And honestly, I want to be able to say Mark Carney is doing a decent job in office, even though I disagree with him on a lot. But this is such a strong moral issue, like I said, that it kind of just makes me feel like, buddy, you got to change this shit now, or it's kind of fuck you. I mean, not even kind of. It is fuck you until you change this shit. And even then, it's like, the fact that you're not already there, even if you're afraid of US repercussions. And if it's for any other reason than that, it's even less understandable. It's a stupid position, again, because Israel is becoming such a pariah state. The rest of the world can see this with such moral clarity, and not, the civilian populations of most countries, or if not all countries, in the entire world, see this for what it is. And even a lot of governments, both Western and otherwise, especially otherwise, the non-Western countries have been a lot better in terms of their government policy towards this. But if we can't even catch up to that place now that there's a famine going on, it's like you're failing on this issue. This is a cowardly, weak position. And with Keir Starmer over in the UK, the other country that France was unable to get on board with their recognition of a Palestinian state, it's the same story. Their weaselly little prime minister, Keir Starmer, comes out with this statement: "The suffering and starvation unfolding in Gaza is unspeakable and indefensible. While the situation has been grave for some time, it has reached new depths and continues to worsen. We are witnessing a humanitarian catastrophe. I will hold an emergency call with E3 partners tomorrow." Blah, 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 blah. I can't even read this. It's the same type of shit as Mark Carney. The reason why this one pisses me off even more is because Keir Starmer, back near the start of the current escalation post-October 7th, on a radio show, he made comments about how Israel has the right to cut off water, electricity, food, aid to Gaza because that's part of their right to self-defense. So Keir Starmer explicitly in the past, you can look up the clip yourself, I'm not lying, I'm not exaggerating, this is explicitly what he was asked, and he explicitly said that Israel had the right to do those things as part of their right to self-defense. And now that the repercussions of those things, the ugly, disgusting, horrific repercussions of those things are surfacing and being seen worldwide, now he's saying, it's unspeakable and indefensible. It's like, shut the fuck up, you weaselly bastard. Like, you're honestly a horrible person. I don't know how you can sleep at night, and you should be ashamed of yourself forever. And when we talk about the famine and the horrific things happening in Gaza, I know that Israel and their defenders love to pretend it's not happening. Even Donald fucking Trump, who I cannot stand, just like most people of my political persuasion, or I should say all people of my political persuasion. Have you ever met a progressive Trump voter? That's an oxymoron. But even Trump is saying, like, he can't deny what's happening in Gaza. He was asked, like, oh, do you agree with Netanyahu that there's no starvation in Gaza? And Trump says, look, those children look very hungry. This is real starvation. You can't fake that. All right. When even orange, goofy ass clown, con man, grifter, fascist himself is saying that you can't really deny that there is real starvation happening in Gaza. There's a mass famine happening right now. It's disgusting. The pictures are horrific. The reality on the ground is even worse. Israel, in sick and twisted fashion, continues to kill Gazans seeking aid. What they do, it's a horrible, just disgusting process, and I can't believe that they are getting away with this to any extent. Thankfully, a lot of people are calling them out, but unfortunately, those with real power in the situation continue to let it happen. But they set up these aid sites, and then people wait for the food, and then they give them this short window where they can come get the food, and it's super dehumanizing, and just, there's this huge rush of people to get this small supply of essentials and food that already is just not enough. And then after a while, they give them a 5-minute warning, and then they just start firing on anybody who's left over. They just kill innocent civilians waiting for aid. They lure them in and then kill them. Like, it's disgusting. It's like, I don't know, they're treating them as they always have, like animals. And Israel and their entire government need to be prosecuted. We need to have Nuremberg trials part 2, Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, Yoav Gallant, all these sick, twisted individuals need to be put in jail for the rest of their lives. And it's just horrific what's happening. And frankly, if Canada and UK can't get their act together and get on board soon, like I said, their legacies are already stained, and both countries, of course, have lots of stains on their history already. But in big 2025, we should be past the era of supporting colonial, genocidal, ethnic cleansing, starvation campaigns. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that Carney and his liberal government and Keir Starmer and the Labour government are still both siding and barely able to criticize. Only now that we're at the stage of mass starvation, now when it's almost too late, they finally come out with some mild criticism for Israel. It's just disgusting. It's gross. It's cowardly. It's weak, and it needs to change now.